Hello, everyone. This is Eva Nolik-Smith with YogaUOnline, and I'm extremely pleased to be here today with Lynn Crimando. I like to joke that Lynn is the person I know who has the most acronyms after her name. She's a yoga therapist. She's also a board-certified health and wellness coach, certified personal trainer, and corrective exercise specialist. So I believe, Lynn, you're probably one of the people I know that knows the most about working with aging bodies, which makes you a special person in my world, because we have this situation where most of us are fortunate to live a lot longer. But the downside, the flip side of that is if we don't take steps to prepare for a longer life, we easily end up living with disability and inability to take care of ourselves for the last 10, 15, 20 years of our lives. And I was just, before we met, I was looking up some statistics, and disability from musculoskeletal disorders is one of the first causes of disability in the US. And the problem actually tops issues that we have, like cancer, stroke, and heart disease. Musculoskeletal disorders is responsible for half of all chronic conditions affecting people over 50. And I would say it's a little bit of a black hole in the medical system, right? Because if you have back pain, arthritis, or any kind of issues with your joints, you go to the doctor and they will give you two options, right? Drugs and surgery. And both of those are known to not really necessarily have long-term, well-tested benefits in terms of track record where it actually helps. It's sort of like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So tell us about your work and how you got interested in this line of inquiry.
Well, first of all, you left off one of the more pertinent initials that I have, which is senior fitness specialist. Yeah, I have been working with mature bodies. I don't ever use the word senior, but I've been working with mature bodies for 20 years. It's just the rabbit hole I fell into. And what I keep learning is how we're thinking about aging when we get there. How we start thinking about medicine and surgery and correcting things that if we had started back thinking differently, we wouldn't be here. So the statistic that I'm thinking about is one from the World Health Organization, that by the year 2050, 22% of the population will be over 60. There are currently more 60-plus-year-olds than more 5-year-olds living in the world. So this is a big segment of the population. And the thing is that a term that I always use, and I always use it in the context of yoga, is that we are living longer, but we want to inhabit our lives for the rest of our lives. And so it's not going to be enough to live longer if we are living with decline. And the way that we're going to live with decline is if we're not paying attention to the markers, to what happens. And neuromuscular aging is important, but it's also an indication of something somewhat bigger, which is, if we think about the normal aging process, the normal aging process has a lot of decline in it. For example, we lose muscle mass. So a 25-year-old has about 50% of their total body weight is lean muscle mass, but by the age of 75, it's about 25%. So you've lost muscle mass. That is sometimes, people talk about lost muscle mass and they call that sarcopenia. And a lot of people know about sarcopenia. Now, lost muscle mass on its own isn't so much a problem. It's when you lose power. And this is, I think, what you'll hear more and more about, because where the community of research is going is that there are people who have lost muscle mass, but because they're still working actively with the muscles that they have, the loss of muscle power, that's dynapenia. That is a much more comprehensive problem. So there are three things that indicate a loss of neuromuscular health and overall danger zones for aging. And when you get to that point, you are losing your ability to live independently. And that is loss of appropriate gait. So you see people who toggle like those toys when you tilt the thing and their legs are just going like that. And so instead of their stride going forward, it's going side to side. Loss of the ability to walk fast. People don't realize, but loss of the ability to walk fast is an indication that you are having a neuromuscular spiral that you ought to be paying attention to. And loss of balance. Those three things can contribute to all of those issues that you talked about, arthritis, cancer, all of those are facts of life, and those are bad. But what really affects people horribly as they age is falling. And falling is the number one reason why most people visit the hospital for trauma, is a fall. And falling affects people of all ages, but it becomes really, really dangerous when you're older. So that loss of neuromuscular ability that you talked about is really important. But the other things we want in healthy aging is we want a sensory motor acuity. We want, and this is why yoga is a perfect place to talk about this, because sensory motor, what does that sound like? Mind body is the kind of the you could break it down to, a lot of people do see, feel, touch, see, hear, touch. The ocular and sensory motor system, the vestibular system, the balance system, and the proprioceptive system. Those three things working together create our ability to adapt our bodies to a constantly changing environment. So what we lose as we age, we lose executive function. It diminishes. We lose muscle mass. Muscle converts to contractile tissue, converts to non-contractile tissue. We lose the ability, right? And we lose speed. The afferents, the signals coming in, so that the signals of the nervous system going between the nervous system and the muscles going move, turn, jump back. That door is heavier than you thought, adjust. The ability to adjust our sensory motor sort of coordination is slowing down.
I think that's so interesting, because usually, when we hear about aging and the changes, we hear about loss of bone mass, loss of muscle mass, as you said, but we hear very little about this term neuromuscular aging, which is, as you were just talking about, the integration of the brain with the musculoskeletal system. And I believe there is a lot of, it's obviously, as you just said, critical for healthy aging, because it affects our mobility, our coordination, our ability to avoid falls and fractures, our ability to take care of ourselves. And I believe there's a lot of interesting new research happening in this area.
There's a ton of it. So what people do to preserve their muscles is they go to the gym and they do strength training, right? They do bicep curls. Bicep curls There's nothing wrong with them. They will make you better at doing this.
Bicep curls. Skill we all need.
But what the new research is showing is, I think this is extremely pertinent to yoga, is we have to think differently about how we're training ourselves for aging. Our aging needs to be multisensory. It needs to be multi-directional, multi-dimensional. It needs to be variable. There are a whole lot of factors in aging. We're just going through the same routine every day is not going to train you. So the more current research is saying our training that we do in the gym or in the yoga studio or wherever we do it should be replicating the activities of daily living. So I always, this is really, I'll tell you a funny story. It's because one of my students sent me a comic from the New Yorker last week. She had heard me say in class, because we only practice dynamic balance, where we're mixing things up, where I am saying, get in balance, close your eyes, turn your head, bend your knees, go to the other leg. We're just mixing it up. She sent me and I said to the class, doing tree pose will make you really good at doing tree pose. And she sent me a comic from the New Yorker where there's yoga teachers in tree pose at the front of the room, and there's a student in tree pose at the back of the room, and the yoga teacher is saying, now this will make you really good for those times when you're standing on one leg and the other leg is bent at your knee. So I think where we're going to go as we age and as we learn more about it is we're going to go toward a much different approach to how we move our bodies into the aging process. And I had mentioned something to you before that I'm really interested in, which is dual tasking. So it turns out that walking and texting at the same time may not be the worst thing in the world if you're watching where you're going, because there are lots of studies that show that when you do multiple cognitive functions, especially variable prioritizing of them. So for example, you're doing a tree pose, but you're counting backwards from 100, or you're doing the multiplication table of 9, which is to me the hardest one. You're doing a cognitive data heavy process while you're doing another process like walking. Creates a better internal sense of equilibrium and a better internal sense of somatosensory awareness, that by layering tasks. So, and the interesting, I was actually just reading today another interesting study where they said that if you do a fixed thing, if you say we're going to do tree pose and you're going to concentrate on your multiplication tables of 9, you'll get less of a result if you go, we're going to do a tree pose, now concentrate on the multiplication tables, now look over there, now concentrate on your leg, and you keep changing. So the approach to training has to be that you are progressively increasing the volume and the challenge and the variety. And this kind of falls in the face of what we hear about how people treat seniors in yoga class, where they're using their special voice and they're just trying not to upset anyone. And it turns out
I'm on a chair.
yeah, you should be challenging every sense and making people, because that's what you're practicing. You're practicing executive function. You're practicing cognitive acuity. You're practicing tracking where you're going. You're practicing people think of balance as a one-legged thing, but if you think about walking, it's strike, swing, strike, swing, right? And there's a counter-posing action. That's an action we should be practicing in yoga class.
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's very interesting because even, disregarding, the integrating various cognitive functions, we can say that the way yoga is practiced in most studios today, there's, in a sense, two approaches. There's the fast vinyasa flow class where people move in and out of movement, which I guess to some degree is helpful in terms of building overall coordination of gross muscular movements. And then the other part of how many people teach is helping students to find the actions in yoga poses, where you have things like, inner spiral, outer spiral, all the different actions in Tadasana, lifting the arches, lifting the kneecaps, which is very abstract and complicated in the beginning for a lot of students, but really creates that isometric contraction where they begin to develop more awareness of the muscles in their body and how to use it.
But you're also directing their attention and you're shifting
Exactly
the focal point of the attention. And if you added into that, now look forward, now focus on, so I use this a lot. I use the flying lotus mudra. And we might just start with this, but I'll say, come into a pose. Do the isometric contraction, feel your back heel grounding, do this, do that. Now change your focus, look far, look near, look far, look near. So you can bundle a bunch of interesting layers in with the neuromuscular stuff, because we have the neuromuscular stuff down. And the other thing that I love about yoga, and I'm in my personal practice and in my teaching practice, is more of the somatic thing where we are directing people into their experience.
Right.
Because that's the sensory piece. That's the proprioceptive piece of knowing where your joints are in space and in relative to each other. So that is a really huge, when people don't have that, they're losing independence. And
it really gives a wonderful approach for working with older adults without dumbing down the yoga practice, because Tadasana, if it's instructed correctly, can be an exceedingly challenging pose in terms of the mental, cognitive focus and the integration of the mind and the body, the neuromuscular system that it requires. And I think it's something that we don't quite even realize enough as yoga teachers, this tremendous potential that yoga has for structuring this healthy neuromuscular aging. And because we think it's such an important topic, we invited you to give a course on it on YogaU. So tell us about the course and what you'll be teaching us.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about these concepts, and we're going to talk a lot about how I think we can build these little trinkets. I call them doodads and gewgaws, but we can add them into any yoga practice to enrich it proprioceptively, sensory wise. We can enrich the whole experience. And it's not just for older people. Ask a group of very advanced practitioners to go into Tadasana, to bring their arms over their head and to close their eyes, as I did this morning. And you will see on your Zoom screen 20 out of 25 people falling out of their Tadasana. So to bring these enriching sensory motor experiences into yoga practice is one of the things we'll be talking about. So I'm going to go through a lot of the theory, and then I'm going to make a big case for how yogis need to start working with dynamic balance in every single. So I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about balance, because the three things that will cause us to lose independence and become greater fall risks are the three things that I said that I don't think anybody, I've never heard anyone in yoga talk about: loss of balance, loss of gait, and loss of the ability to walk fast. You just don't hear that. So I'm going to talk about the theories behind some of this that we've been discussing. And then I've created some practices where I've really gone a little off the deep end. But this is what I've been doing with my classes, and they're totally loving it because they can see the difference.
And you teach like 70
Most of the
people on
that
Zoom, the 70-year-old group.
Yeah, most of my students are over 70. I have two groups that I work with. I work with a mat group who this morning I had 84, 85-year-olds doing down dog to plank, doing forearm plank with core breath. No problem. But I also work with another group that's more of a community group, that's a chair-based group. And we've been doing this work, and I'm getting so many notes from them. That group will be like upwards of 60 people. And I'm just in one way blowing their minds, because I'm just saying, well, today we're just going to go like this. and then now stand up and balance, and they're like, what just happened? So
yeah, well, that's the other part of it, the art of helping people work on their balance, right? Because everyone hates balance poses because they fall out of them. And what you've created is showing that there's many paths to working with balance that doesn't involve people getting into a difficult pose and falling out of it. Right? And that's what's so valuable about what you're putting together.
I have actually, I have people in the chair class who are in a wheelchair, and I have them go like this and close their eyes, and I see them going around. So it's work that you can, I think yogis need to look at this, because we're all about connection. We're all about integration. And if we're only looking at one thing, if we're only doing the same vinyasa every single time in the same way, yes, it will help our concentration. It'll help us in those positions in our life that use those. But what I think more and more yogis need to do is break out of the box of doing the pose the same way every time, with the same focus, with the same energy, and not, adding chanting, adding backwards counting, adding, turn your head that way now. So we'll talk a lot about that. I'm, as you can see, a little full of that right now. It's very exciting to me, but all the research that I'm reading is pointing to ways that they are using this kind of work to help stroke victims recover their stroke side, to help Parkinson's people who live with Parkinson's stay upright using these technologies of the sensors that are in your fingers. It's really exciting stuff.
So awesome. Great. Well, we can't wait, Lynn. And thank you so much for joining us to talk more about the course. And we look forward to seeing you online next week.
Well, thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects. I hope to see you next week.
Yes, indeed. All right, take care. And everyone, thanks so much for joining us. And keep an eye on your email for more information about Lynn's course. And take care. Bye-bye.